Our story really kicks off with a collection of texts known as the Veda. You have to think of this as our ground zero, the foundational literature of ancient India. It's the cradle for basically all the big ideas we're going to talk about today. Now, the word Veda itself literally means knowledge, but don't picture an encyclopedia sitting on a shelf. It's more like a living, breathing library of sacred wisdom. It was this massive accumulation of knowledge that was passed down orally from one generation of priests to the next, and it held everything they thought was crucial to know about the universe. So, what was actually in this library of knowledge? Well, a lot of it was religious, as you'd expect. There were these epic myths about how the world was made and really vivid descriptions of all these powerful gods. But, and this is super important, it also had incredibly specific instructions for rituals. These were rituals designed to get real-world results, like making sure you had a good harvest or winning a battle. It was basically a how-to guide for dealing with a world you believed was run by divine forces. But then, over a few centuries, something really remarkable starts to happen. That solid ground of myth and ritual, it begins to show these little cracks of doubt. And this is the real turning point in our story. It's that moment when just believing isn't enough anymore, and people start asking, why? You can actually watch this mental shift happen over time. Around 1500 BC, you've got these pretty straightforward myths. The gods are like the powerful parents of the world. Simple enough. But then things get weird. By about 1000 BC, the perfect performance of the ritual becomes the main event. It's almost like the ritual itself is more powerful than the gods it's for. And this new obsession with getting things exactly right created this analytical mindset that eventually led some thinkers to ask the biggest question of all. Hang on, where did the gods themselves even come from? And this wasn't just, idle curiosity. This new spirit of questioning was aimed at the biggest questions you can possibly imagine. It was a full-on investigation into the very nature of reality, and it's what we can truly call the birth of philosophy in India. And just look at how sophisticated their thinking became. In the later parts of the Veda, you find these competing theories about where everything came from. One idea was a pretty simple evolution from non-being into being. But then there was this second, much more radical theory. It suggested that in the very beginning, there was neither being nor non-being. The universe just arose from some unknowable singular source. Being comfortable with that level of ambiguity, that's pure philosophy. This quote from the Rig Veda, it's absolutely incredible. It captures this entire shift perfectly. Who really knows? The text just comes right out and says it. It speculates that since the gods were born after the world was created, how could they possibly know where it all came from? This profound moment of admitting, we don't know, that is the spark that lit the fire for the entire philosophical quest for truth. But this new rational spirit wasn't just stuck in the realm of abstract thought. Nope. It had some very real, very practical consequences. In fact, that obsession we mentioned earlier, the one about getting rituals just right, that intense demand for precision led directly to the birth of applied sciences. And when you see it laid out like this, it all clicks into place. See, if the ritual is everything, it has to be perfect. For a sacred altar to actually work, its dimensions had to be exact. Boom! You need geometry. The sacred hymns had to be pronounced perfectly with the right intonation. Hello, linguistics. The ceremonies had to happen at the exact right astrological moment. Well, for that, you need astronomy and mathematics. Science wasn't just some academic hobby. It was a religious requirement. And that, right there, brings us back to our opening question. In order to build these sacred altars with perfect right angles and the exact right proportions, the Vedic priests worked out the geometric principles of triangles and quadrilaterals, including a version of what we now call the Pythagorean theorem. So there you have it, a direct line from needing a perfect altar for a religious ceremony to developing some pretty sophisticated math. Amazing, right? So after all of this intense questioning and calculating, what were the big ideas that stuck around? This whole intellectual revolution boiled down to two really foundational concepts that would go on to shape Indian thought for literally thousands of years. The first big idea is Rita. You can think of this as the cosmic order. It's the concept that the universe isn't just random and chaotic. No, it runs according to a fundamental law, an underlying order that governs everything, from the seasons changing to the rules of human morality. It's the universe's operating system. And the second huge idea is Brahman. So if Rita is the law of the universe, Brahman is the ultimate source of that universe. It's the grand, abstract answer to that big question, where did everything come from? And notice, it's not another god with a personality and a story. It's the absolute principle, the very fabric of existence itself. That is a massive leap from those early myths. So, all of this brings us back to ourselves, turning that ancient spirit of inquiry back on our own world. This journey from ritual to reason shows us that the biggest shifts in how we understand things often start when someone dares to question what seems totally certain, which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. What are the unquestionable truths we live by today that future generations might look back on as the great philosophical puzzles of our time? Thanks for joining me on this journey.